Thanks for joining us today. I am Congresswoman Shontel Brown, and I want to talk today about what it's like to do business in Northeast Ohio. Now, before I get into that, I want to just point out the fact that when I first got to Congress, one of my proudest moments was the ability to cast a vote for the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is delivering for Northeast Ohioans, which will deliver for Northeast Ohioans. I say will deliver because we still haven't seen the shovels in the grounds and the cranes in the air, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But that bill is essentially going to help us get better roads. It's going to invest in our airports, our roadways, bridges, public transportation, all the things that are essential to making businesses successful. So to help me with this conversation today, I have some amazing gentlemen here to start our discussion. And so I'm going to give some brief bios of these amazing guests that I have with me to have some questions and maybe some answers and provide a little bit of solutions. And I'm going to start with my friend, Laurice Purnell. If you don't know him, he is the managing partner of CLE Consulting Firm, an accounting firm here in Cleveland. And Laurice has 18 years of experience in business management, tax, and finance. He is the current co-owner and managing partner of CLE Consulting Firm. And it's a payroll company located right here, tax and payroll company located right here in downtown Cleveland, where we're filming today. And one of the things that I like most about my good friend is he is a strong, innovative, financial, and strategic leader with both instincts and intellect, a winning combination for business, the business world. And he's served in executive positions, leading businesses and financial departments within multi-million-dollar organizations, both profit and nonprofit. And is the co-founder of the Real Black Friday. So if you don't know about that, you better get into it, because it was an amazing event during our NBA All-Star Weekend when we were on the world stage, and he had a hand in making us shine bright. My other friend here, Jeffrey Ledwidge, owner and operator of McDonald's, one of our favorites. LLC National Training Lead with 27 plus years. You can't have 27 plus years. You must have started when you were 5.
Oh, I messed up.
But years in operations, training, learning and development, expertise in various aspects of the operations and training, both here in the U.S. and London.
Yes.
Is that correct? I kind of pick up a little bit of that accent here. And has had the ability to not only create but discover solutions for out-of-the-box thinking and a passion for customer satisfaction. And you know there's that expression, customers are always right, but I'm going to challenge you to see if that's really true today.
Sure.
Okay. And then last but not least, Austin Kirkland, my other dear friend, marketing strategist at Millennial Pro LLC, an experienced project manager with a demonstrated history of working in hospital and healthcare industry, and skilled in corporate communications, sales presentations, healthcare management, and organizational development. An amazing talent who put together this impressive presentation for me when I was at an organization seeking their support. So he is a wealth of talent, not only that in the marketing world, but also project management with professional sports and sports management and communications focus in sports management. Now, I'm not an athlete, but I felt like one, because it's like you put together like this all-star reel of my best moments on the campaign trail. So you are a talented brother, and I thank you for that. So those are the guys that are rocking with me today. And so let's get into it, guys. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges of doing business here in Northeast Ohio. And I start with challenges because I know it's not easy. So the floor is yours. Who's going to get us started?
Ooh, where do we start?
Where do we start?
And I wouldn't call them challenges, I would call them opportunities.
Yes.
And you know, I'll say one is having voices like you.
Thank you.
And I was saying before we started this presentation that you have supported the Real Black Friday since the beginning.
Proud to.
Yes, and it's having leadership in place like yourself that will really engage the community, not just at campaign time, not just when we're asking them to come to the ballot, but having trusted leaders are, I think, a very important factor that's going to help businesses really thrive. You know, in our community, we don't just have the trust of organizations, institutions. We have daddy and mama trust issues. So when you talk about that context, that really spills over into how we do business. So again, I would say for me, that's one factor. And I'll let the guys jump in, but I have a lot more to say too.
I like that. I like that.
Yes. And when I think about the community, I employ over 180 people.
Wow.
and they are a part of the community. I call it my family, and so the McDonald's family. When you take a look at what the government can help and support and provide for them, you see a lacking in things as far as understanding different programs that could really help them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if the government in general can try to help folks who are trying to help themselves, you have single mothers with 3 kids, and different other opportunities that they need help with, but they don't have the resources, they don't have the understanding, they don't have the know-how, because these programs are like hidden sometimes and need someone to come and bring them out and help them. I see that as a real win for anyone who can really go in and try to find that niche where we can help our folks.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off some of the things that you all discussed here as well, and it kind of brings me back and ties into digital equity. It makes me think about the access and learning tools and modules that you have to learn about how do I go about getting the LLC, or how do I have access to capital, or how do I have opportunities to be a part of these certification programs like MBE, EDGE, or DBE, some of these educational programs that help support some of our minority businesses as well. So a lot of that can come back to some of that information technology that I don't have access to. And then that ties into also capital as well, which I know that can go into another conversation.
Well, we have a capital expert here, and we have a communications expert here, and we have a customer delivery service expert here. So I would yield and really glean from your experience. But what I can tell you, I agree with you 100%. Access is always been, I think, the biggest challenge. Right now, we have been blessed to have historic investment via the bipartisan infrastructure law. But the question I am asked the most is, how do we get our hands on this money, Chantel? Like, what can we do? So the bipartisan infrastructure law was thoughtful in this administration because they made sure that we had a minority participation goal of 40%. It also was very thoughtful in the fact that it made sure that these dollars are going to go to the communities with the greatest need. So when you think about Cleveland, whose infrastructure is old and there's been a lot of disinvestment over the years, this is the type of funding and program that will really help us overcome some of those obstacles as it relates to access and challenges. I also want to shout out my local office, Kimberly Hodge Edwards, who is my district office manager. She is amazing. So she can help connect the dots for minority businesses to understand how they can apply for some of these funds. The other thing is that we are, in the federal level, we appropriate the funds. We don't really have the ability to necessarily determine how agencies will allocate them, but I am a proud member of the Oversight Committee.
Okay.
So I do get to see exactly what's going on, and that's one of the things that we've been very, very intentional about. So if folks need help, our office is here to serve. Constituent service is one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we deliver very openly, freely, accessibly. So 216-522-4900 is our office number for those that are watching, to make sure that they can give us a call and understand and learn how they can access these programs. But we are going to make that a high priority in the 11th Congressional District.
Yeah, what I like about it, I think about we're sitting at a table right now. And when you talk about access, I think that's an important factor as well, that people in the community see themselves at the table, because we can create opportunities, but if they don't have access, and again, we're not talking about the typical people that always have access.
Exactly.
We're talking about a collective community. So I'm encouraged to see that take place under your leadership here in this community. So,
and as you mentioned, access, I think about convenience. So a lot of times people say, we have access to my office, you can come here, but to them that's not convenient. And going back to even COVID, when we looked at COVID, and as an owner in the community, I thought about how could I impact the people in the community. So instead of them going somewhere, we had it at McDonald's. So I decided to have a black party. So we had a black party. We brought in a couple of other community suppliers and trade people, as well as the radio stations, and we had a black party, and we had some of the highest turnout at McDonald's. So obviously, everybody's going to come to McDonald's. But the accessibility, and also the somewhere where people will come and join you, because it's right there in their neighborhood, and it's a local place. So
I think that's smart. I think that, you know, creating opportunities that make accessibility important. And that's another thing where the federal government in general, has not been, you know, known for their easy access, if you will. And so we are trying to change that. And that is something that really has been one of my core and principle and fundamental values is just meeting people where they are. I am not one that takes pride in manufacturing events, but when the real Black Friday happens, where you have a natural audience of folks, where I can come to an event at a block party at a McDonald's, or I can go to an event where you have convened leaders that are viewing your work, that presents opportunities where I'm reaching people that I wouldn't typically reach. And so I thank you for opening your doors and allowing me those opportunities. So thank you.
So you got real engaged. Man.
You was holding trophies and everything.
Listen.
I said she was all a part of it.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
It was a
That's
really
right.
great time. But I mean, those are the things I think. What you did there was fantastic because while it was collaborative, it wasn't competitive, and I think sometimes that's another challenge that we run into is just this competitive nature. And now we're blessed here in Cleveland, Ohio. We have a new mayor who I have already a great relationship established. And so having a partnership and a collaboration, I think, will avail itself to more opportunities for us to grow and reverse course on decades of disinvestment and disparity, and quite frankly, petty politics that have gotten in the way of the progress of our people. So that's what I'm trying to do. Change the culture.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So-
Absolutely.
Change the culture, change the game.
Change the culture, change the game. And the only way you change the policies if you change the policy makers. And so we've got some new policy makers in this region that will ultimately, I think, have a much greater synergy than we maybe have experienced historically. And so I think that is going to deliver better outcomes for everyone.
Yeah. You know, I'm on the board of Famicos Foundation, and you see the need right there in the community. So between working, I have 5 McDonald's in Cleveland, so between working at McDonald's and going to Famicos as a part-time job, you really understand the plight and what's happening in the community and how we can try to help to get folks where they need to go.
Yeah.
Because they're dying for help.
Yeah.
And sometimes the bureaucracy is in the way,
Yeah.
and they don't know how to get around that.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
Yeah, and I think of even when you tie all of that information in together as well too, it brings me back to even racial disparities or inequalities that even focuses on some of those gap closures as well. I think about even, when you think about percentages of minorities versus, whites related to percentage-wise and wealth and how much they generate as far as on the income standpoint. And those are disparities that ties into some of the efforts of understanding, access, of course, inequalities and opportunities as well too. So I love the work that is happening right now. I think the office is going to be, they're going to blow your phone up. You didn't get the whole number out now. So
I warned my staff, so they are. But this is the other thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad. I appreciate you saying that, because the other thing that people may or may not realize is that, we represent a little over, just under 700,000 people. More than 650,000 people in a congressional district is what the population is. And so on any given week, we get about at least 800 correspondences a week. At least 800 correspondences. And we have a very lean staff, and they're not all bad. That some of them are folks like you that are appreciative of the work. But I just want to set the expectation. So when we're managing that, and we came into an office that had a backlog of 4,000 correspondences because we were absent our representation for a few months there, more than a few months, from March to November. And so all of those requests have been building up, and so we've been doing our part. So we have a small but mighty staff. But it's really doing everything that they can to make sure that we are delivering quality constituent services. And so I just also in the midst of while we are talking about improving access, is setting up realistic expectations for folks. I think what we did is somewhat of a disservice when it came down to this last 2020 election cycle. As a Democrat, I said before, you as a proud Democrat, we expressed that we had the majority. And we have the majority of the House by a very slim number. But a 50+1 in the Senate does not constitute a serious majority at the Senate. And so I think that we get held accountable for having all the power, which clearly we don't. If we did, a lot more things would be getting done. And there's been a lot of emphasis put on 2 senators, one from West Virginia, one from Arizona. But clearly if we had that 60 or 59 even threshold where we could get a lot more things done and we could maybe pull a couple Republicans in on our side, things would be, we'd be seeing a lot more advancement. But I would say this too, the bipartisan infrastructure law is delivering billions of dollars here in Ohio, just Northeast Ohio alone, $1.8 billion for road repair. And so when we think about that, the number of jobs that are going to be created behind that is going to change. It's going to be a boost into the economy. So they're going to be relying on people like you to help us get our financial services in order for businesses to be shored up. Because this bipartisan infrastructure law is not a 1-year deal or 2-year deal. This is over a decade of investment. And so the American Rescue Plan, which really was the first step of the 3 parts, what I would describe as the 3 legs of a stool. The American Rescue Plan was the shot in the arm for our government. So that was the funds that went to cities and counties and police departments and fire departments and schools to make sure that they had the resources during the pandemic. So that's that $500 million that the city received right now to be able to do some amazing things over the next few years. Then we passed a bipartisan infrastructure law, which I had a hand in, $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years that'll be going in. And then the Build Back Better, which I think people, if I asked anyone, what's the difference between Build Back Better and the bipartisan infrastructure law, they probably couldn't tell us. But the Build Back Better was actually the human infrastructure component that would reduce the cost of living. So that was the one that was going to expand education, making the 2-year colleges free. It was going to expand the child tax credit, or the family tax cut is another way that people like to describe it, that put $435 in everybody's home that had children on average, that affected 70,000 households here in Cuyahoga County. It was the one that was going to reduce child care costs to help get people back into the workforce as we are experiencing a challenge with employees. And as employers, I guess I would ask you that, what are some of the things that we can do to help get our people back into the workforce? Because that seems to be a question that I get asked a lot, but I think you guys are more of the experts in that area.
Yeah, I would say just from what we were able to experience, one thing, with being a service-based organization, is before the pandemic, I was only competing with local firms for employees. Now, when an employee that lives in Cleveland can work for a firm in San Diego or from in Atlanta or in DC, now I'm competing with the whole, entire nation for talent. So I would say, just making sure that as, bills that you put into place, make sure that they understand who are the organizations in the community that are the true partners that are doing the work, making sure that you help with capacity building of those organizations locally is really, really important. But that's something I never thought I would have to deal with. And now getting people off the couch. It's like, hey, I can work from home. I don't have to go. And in our industry, our clients want to see us. They want to see us in their facility. They want to see us in the building. So that probably is one of the biggest challenges. We have more professionals, so they're paid at a livable wage, so we're not having the child care, issues, or they're not being able to afford to pay their bills. But that's probably the biggest challenge. We're having to be competitive and to be able to still, service our clients. So because during the pandemic, I felt as our organization, CLE, we shifted from being an accounting firm to literally, I felt like we were the respirator to small businesses in our community. Because when you think about it, when small Black-owned businesses didn't have or build relationships prior to the pandemic, they didn't have a banking relationship, they didn't have an insurance broker they can call. So when the banks closed their doors, well, what happened? When they could not, pick up the phone and call and say, I need PPP, or I need some capital to make sure I survive. So they called us. But guess what? If we don't have the capacity, or now everybody in Cleveland is, if they look like us, it's like, oh, let's call Larice or call Meltrice or call CLE. Well, what are we going to do, to be able to survive that? But I'll tell you that from a work perspective, workforce perspective, that's probably the biggest challenge that we're dealing with currently.
And that's one that I quite candidly haven't heard a lot of, but have a great appreciation for, because, like you said, you're I think you're limiting yourself by saying just in the country. That's a global. You're competing globally for talent, right?
For sure.
Yeah. What about you guys?
Yeah, it changed a lot, and I echo a lot of the things that you had just shared with us as well. Because to now everyone is remote, and we're a marketing, digital marketing service. So a lot of our content is based on what we can do remotely. But you're in a competitive market now across the nation compared to what's locally. So part of that is that access to capital, where I can generate more fundings over here with a much larger firm, opposed to being with a much smaller company like ourselves. So it's that competitive nature, that competitive market to where we're competing to give, where you're having such high retentions related to just some of those employees going in and out of them. And then also I have to make sure that I have a part-time job. I have to provide food for my family at home. I have to make sure I take care of my kids. I have all of these essential assets that I have to provide for. Now that makes me go back from an inequality standpoint to, okay, is this job efficient enough for me to be able to sustain this position? Now I have to make sure I move into a more competitive market, which offers greater opportunity, but at lower risk.
Yeah. What about
Well, unlike these two guys, nobody can cook hamburger from home.
Yes.
So, some of the things I see that really would help is after-school programs.
Okay.
And if you think about what happened in our society, if kids leave school and they have nowhere to go, nothing to do, if we don't have a good community center with computers or games or whatever, then they don't know what to do, and so they stray. Yeah. So after school programs, additional healthcare subsidies from the government.
Oh yeah.
Because we live in a country where healthcare is enormous. I don't care who you are.
That's right.
It hits your pocket.
Yeah.
And so just think about the average person. So how can we provide that for them? The other thing is, how can we generate enough jobs and work training where people can say, okay, and I'll give you a typical example. When I drive around the community sometimes and there is a construction company doing something, who's holding the flag, right? So we talk about programs that can help, but if there is no training to get these programs where a minority can actually train to become a payroll owner instead of a flag owner, then nothing changes.
This is true.
Because wealth stays the same.
This is true.
So when people think, when you talk about money in the community or these plans, it's really about how am I going to take this and generate wealth for the next generation to come? How am I going to put these infrastructure things in place so that there's work opportunities, training, development for folks that the next time, or in 3 years or 2 years or 5 years, they're moving from this position to this position. And if that doesn't happen, then it's a continuous, I'm holding the flag.
But, I'll say something to that, though, because, we sometimes from a leadership perspective in the community, at certain levels, will always say people have to change. The community has to think different. They have to do. We're always telling them what they need. We're pointing the finger what they need to do. But sometimes, even from a leadership perspective, we have to learn to pivot. So the pandemic, we talked about communities reset. Politics have to reset. Or large organizations have to reset. We can't, because one issue I think is programs aren't the issue. One thing, we will throw a program at everything, program. But the reality is, if I'm working 9 to 5 and your program is 12 to 5, well, you wonder why there's nobody in attendance.
That's right.
Well, is that organization willing to do a Sunday program?
Right.
Are they willing to do an evening program? Not, well, my staff won't work in the evening. Well, then your organization is not the organization to provide the service. And I think that's something I'm not seeing enough of in our community. So then when we're talking about workforce issues, training issues, well, we got to pivot. We got to do some online. We got to use, Austin and his company to do digital, create that digital access to training. So that's something that I would like to see a lot more happen.
I love that idea. I think that is smart, and that those are the type of things that we're actually in Build Back Better. Again, making those investments in the training in the workforce. So it got it's stalemated in the Senate. We're looking for them to give us something back, make some amendments, but I think I would be remiss if I did not point out the fact that this is an administration and a Congress on the House side that was thoughtful in those areas, understanding that that's an accessibility factor, right? Making sure we have access. And so improving access is going to be essential. You also touched on, when you touched on programs, and it's going to segue nicely into our next segment, because I'm going to bring this one to a close, but I could talk to you guys all day. But when we talk about those after-school programs, I think we have a guest coming up from the Boys and Girls Club who identified what you touched on a little bit was the peak time when some of the crimes are being caused by some of our youth, which is after work, between after school and after work for parents. There's like a lag between 2 and 7. And so the Boys and Girls Club have been servicing that need with their programs, but still not enough, right? And so we just have to make those investments, be willing to adjust, make those pivots so that we can be accessible to the people who are in the greatest needs, if I heard you guys correctly. And so this has been a great conversation, and I can't wait to do it again. I hope you guys will come back and join me so we can have another conversation and talk about a little bit more, because I just feel like we just scratched the surface, just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, just the tip of the iceberg. So stay tuned. We will be back with these amazing gentlemen for more conversations about doing business in Northeast Ohio, particularly with our African American men and how we can improve access for our community. Thank you for watching again. I'm Congresswoman Chantel Brown, and this has been an amazing session talking about doing business in Northeast Ohio.